Welcome to Module 6 of Procurement and Sourcing. This week we're going to look at Services Procurement. Now we've got a few things we'd like to accomplish. Certainly we want to identify what exactly is unique about services purchasing. We want to talk about some strategies that we can use to mitigate some of those challenges that we face. And finally we want to get a little bit of practice at developing the ever-elusive statement of work that's so critical in services procurement. So I frame services procurement as one of the special cases of procurement, and while we follow the traditional procurement model of requirements, sourcing, bidding, awarding, and then contract management, there are special situations that occur with services procurement that make it a unique animal to deal with, and one that we have to be maybe a little more cautious or careful if we're really going to be effective in procuring those things for our organizations. So one, certainly services procurement has been growing as more and more companies outsource services to other firms, whether that's as simple as building services to maintain the facility, to trade services like plumbing and electricians, to technical services of design and computer engineering. It should not be treated as routine procurement, where we have a very clear specification of an item or a design or a blueprint of something that we're going to procure. This is going to take a little more finesse and a little more effort to identify exactly what we're asking the external provider to do for us. Finally, it's going to, or rather additionally, it's going to introduce some risks that we wouldn't deal with if we were doing the service ourselves. And so we want to make sure that our contract and our governance structure maintains diligence monitoring for those risks, and also creates a language and a contract that minimizes those opportunities from happening. And we're going to look at this as more of a unique process and something that we'll handle differently than our routine procurement. So let's jump in and talk a little bit. You'll get more in your readings this week. I've selected a few articles as well as a video, and certainly our chapter in the textbook. But key to this whole process of effective services procurement is the statement of work. The statement of work is a document, a narrative that describes what it is we're trying to procure. And it needs to be written in such a way that as we go out to our marketplace of potential providers, that they will each clearly understand without major assumptions what it is we're trying to procure. What do we want them to do? What time period will it need to occur in? Are there special requirements for badging or insurance or training or equipment that they're going to need to take into consideration? Are there personnel requirements where the people executing the service, will they need to be of a certain nationality? Will they need security clearances? Will they need any special licensing? And then how will we actually monitor the quality of their service? And what's going to be the review cycle to initiate them in doing the service? So those are some items that I hope as you hear them, as a procurement professional, I'm not going to be able to provide answers to all those questions. And that's another part of what makes services procurement so important, is that in many cases, we're going to need to partner with the internal customer. We're going to have people intimately involved with doing the work or having the service provided to them so that they can describe what their expectations are. We're going to have to learn from past experiences if this is something that we've outsourced in the past, or if this is a service that we internally provided before. We should be able to look to those people that have provided it before as experts that can help us identify the parameters that occur, or the parameters that need to be observed when performing this service. We also want to take into consideration any changes, whether this is a service that we are outsourcing for the first time, or if this is something we've outsourced in the past. We want to make any revisions if there's new equipment or new procedures in place or any changes that will need to be taken into consideration in the bidding process. We want to document everything if that needs flow charts, procedures guides, anything necessary, so that when these bid packages go out and include this statement of work, that it will clearly communicate to those potential bidders what we're looking for. We're going to use a team approach, as I mentioned earlier, where we're going to include our internal customer early on and any other special resources, whether those are legal resources or security resources or anything else in our organization, bring them into the team to make sure all of those aspects are covered in that statement of work. And then finally, and you'll hear more about this value approach during the LRAM and Tate interview video that you'll listen to and watch, is that we really want to ensure that we're adding value to the process, and Tate and LRAM provide us with some framework to look at how that value can be added and what value procurement adds to that process. So what's the ideal service supplier look like? They probably will have more knowledge of the service that we want to buy than we do. There should be experts in their area, whether that is a technical service like architecture or design or drawings or CAD work, or whether that's a operational service like maintenance or facilities management or trade services like electricians and plumbers. They should really be the experts in their area and have sufficient experience and skill to complete the work that we're asking for. We'd like a service provider that's willing to educate us in what's the cutting edge application of their service. We'd like a service provider that's willing to ask questions and engage with us and really integrate with our organization so they can successfully provide what we're looking for, and at the same time provide maybe a springboard for identifying additional opportunities. We want ones that listen, ones that are prepared to help us solve problems for our organization. Another item that will be touched on in this discussion is the pricing. Pricing can be quite challenging, particularly if we haven't been internally providing the service in the past. If in the past we had people internally that provided the service, then we can look at our costing structure. We can look at the hours that were required to do it, the labor rates that we paid, the benefits, and so forth, to get a better understanding of the pricing option. But as we move through this series that I have listed here, operating services, professional services, technical services, picture operating services being the routine labor assistance that we might need in our organization, whether that's maintenance, assembly, lawn care services, professional services, legal services, medical services, possibly technical writers, that type of work. Technical services is more looking at the higher end engineering skills, computer science, those type of things. And picture the higher the skill level is required, the harder it is for us to understand the differences potentially between the bidders, where they each say, yes, we have licensed engineers or we have educated engineers on our staff, but how do we know how valid their education is? Their licensing, when they achieve their licensing, how it applies to what we're doing. So the further removed from us that service and technical aspect is, the less we're going to know about it and the more difficult it's going to be for us to assess the price that we should be getting. That makes it even more dependent that we define that SOW very clearly and that we have a very competitive set of suppliers to bid it, in hopes that we can, through that process, really identify the best supplier to provide our service. Contract administration still occurs there at the end of the process after we make the award. Again, it is a little more difficult in services because we really want to ensure that the services that we have identified and that we have contracted for are actually performed in the way that we specify them. So we need to rigorously and aggressively manage that contract. And often that will be a contract that's handed over to our internal customer, and that internal customer will be responsible for the day-to-day execution of that contract. Primarily, we want to make sure that we get the right supplier to begin with. If they're capable and knowledgeable, then we expect that they will be able to execute the terms of the contract. And I like to add that in, fair and reasonable price. If we've gone out and so aggressively bid this contract that we have cut the margins to a point where the provider is not motivated to provide the service as specified, then we put ourselves in a very risky situation. So while we want to be frugal and prudent in our bidding activities, we also want to make sure that we've awarded in such a way that the supplier of choice will be able to deliver the contract. Here's our plan for the week. Keep an eye on this. This document is also part of a greater document that I have noted there called the Module 6 Weekly Materials Guide. And those are both available in Blackboard, and they'll be your roadmap for the week. I do this little visual because it helps me keep track of things. And right now we're up in that top left-hand corner with the Porterfield video introduction. Next, go ahead and read that chapter, get a handle on the items and the types of topics that we're going to discuss. And then there's a discussion board out there already waiting for you, and there are some specific questions and instructions to get you started on that in the weekly materials guide. Simultaneously in that, go ahead and read the article that's been provided. It's by Lisa Arnseth, and it talks about services procurement, of course. And then on your own, complete the SOW writing activity, which is also described in the weekly materials guide. On the side, I also want you to take a look at the LRAM and tape video. It's linked in our Blackboard folder, and it's approximately 15 minutes. And these two researchers provided an article that I've also mentioned to you from the California Management Review. And they provide some highlights on that, and then a discussion on a new 2x2 matrix they put together that is not part of the California Management Review article. And then there's a few questions listed in the weekly guide for you to answer on your own as a Word document and post that over to Blackboard. So that's our plan for the week. It's going to involve a discussion board, some reading, an activity, and then some answers to some discussion questions. So I wish you luck. I know this can be services procurement's a little out there topic anyway for many of us, even as procurement people. We often avoid services procurement because it's more complex. But I believe this approach will give us a really good taste for what's going on out there. So enjoy your week, and post an email or a question in the discussion board if you have any issues come up.